Hello everybody, this will be the first video in a short series of videos in which I talk about a particular form of socialism in a short time. As you can read in the title, this one is syndicalism. You may have heard of it from Monty Python or in the popular Hearts of Iron Mod Kaiserreich, but that's pretty much it nowadays. But back in the day, and by that I mean before World War I, syndicalism was one of the main revolutionary ideologies of the people. At the time there wasn't a real model for how the working people would go about the revolution which Marx had called inevitable. The only real practical example was the Paris Commune, and that one happened more on accident than on purpose. Link to my video on the Paris Commune in the top right corner. How do you go about giving the workers the control over the means of production? At the time, the choice was between Marxists, who at this time were largely reformists, and syndicalists, who were more revolutionary. At the time, Leninism was not yet invented, so that was all there was. What's a syndicate, you may ask? It's sort of like a regional government. Imagine roughly the size of a county government in the USA. The syndicate would be ruled by a direct democracy. Who would get the vote is a little foggy sometimes, and many original syndicalists dismissed the suffragette movement as bourgeois movement. So how did the syndicalists want to go about taking the means of production from the owners? They wanted to form unions, which would slowly demand more and more power using strikes, and ultimately assume the ownership over the means of production for themselves. This would require all unions to do it at the same time though, so that the police couldn't crush the movement. The fact that unions usually don't have a single leader also makes this a very attractive method of revolution for anarchists who, as you know, oppose unjust hierarchy. Historically, syndicalism never got into a position to take power, and after the rise of fascism, which destroyed it, and Leninism, which largely replaced it, there aren't many syndicalists left. Nowadays, syndicalism is in a tough place. The USA is still barely unionized, and even in countries like Germany and France, where union membership is high, unions are far from the revolutionary hotbeds they used to be. Today, it would be hard to rally unions to strike to get ownership over the means of production, since most workers aren't familiar with socialism anymore. Most socialist parties have abandoned syndicalism in favor of Leninism or Maoism as well. Another problem with syndicalism is that it would de facto lead to a dictatorship of the syndicates, in which the unions would form syndicates that would be controlled by the union members. Of course, the goal of syndicalism is to create a direct democracy for everyone, but the method of revolution would put the unions in a position to take power for themselves and ignore those workers who aren't unionized and simply not give them the right to vote. After all, the unions might want to punish those workers who refused solidarity when the time for revolution came. Why would the syndicates give power to those who doubted them? Why would a worker who didn't take part in the general strike be allowed to get the benefits? Of course, there are solutions to that, but we have to acknowledge the problems in order to be able to solve them. Before the end, I'm going to go over the features of syndicalism Eric Olson wrote down. First, a preference for federalism over centralism. Under syndicalism, there wouldn't be a central government that dictates policy, and every syndicate would have to approve a law for it to be in place there. Second, opposition to political parties. Syndicalists oppose political parties because they worked with the government, which serves the bourgeoisie. The syndicalist government would be filled with experts and representatives who are elected by the syndicates. Third, seeing the general strike as the supreme revolutionary weapon. As I mentioned before, syndicalists believe in national or even global strikes as tool of the revolution. They prefer this over reformism or armed uprising. Fourth, favoring the replacement of the state by a federal economic organization of society. Again, because they were mostly anarchists, they preferred a federation over a state, and they wanted that federation to be as small as possible. Fifth, seeing unions as the basic building blocks of a post-capitalist society. To them, unions were the optimal way to achieve the new socialist society, since the unions would represent the will of the workers, or at least the will of the unionized workers. And that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you like this style of short video overview over an ideology. See ya!